Okay, guys. So, first of all, wow, I'm so pleasantly surprised to see so many ladies show up for the shir. This is a shir that I've given maybe 5 times or something like that over the last years in Efrat here in Be'er Sheva, in different kind of settings to different kinds of groups. This is the first time that I'm giving this shir to an all like Chabad group, basically. Okay, of Chabad ladies who cover their hair and mostly try to do it in the best way and all of that. So it's a little bit different. There's been times when I've done this year more like we take the Maamer and learn through it systematically and then talk about what comes out from it. And we're going to do it a little differently this way. We're going to kind of jump around between the different concepts, the Halacha, the chassidus, and more just talk over what comes out from it, because I think that's what works best after many times that I've given this year in different formats. Let's just start with this. First of all, what is this shir about? So, Michla publicized the shir as a shir about hair covering, which is sort of true, but it's not really the whole story. This shir is a shir about, I've called it in the past, why is the Torah obsessed with hair? Okay? That's what I've called the shir in the past. Why is the Torah obsessed with hair? Because if somebody wants to come to this shir to understand, for example, why men are supposed to have beards, or why a nazir grows his hair, they'll get the answer just as much from this shir as why women cover their hair and what it means. Because that's what the shir is about. And what we're going to find is that according to chassidus, the Torah has a unified kind of theory about what is the meaning of hair, what does it represent, and how different hair of different people on different parts of the body have different spiritual meanings at different times and places, and therefore have different ways that they're dealt with according to Halacha. Okay? I want to just qualify by saying that I'm not coming here to teach Halacha. I'm not a Rav. I'm not coming here to tell you the halachas of covering your hair. Nothing that I say should necessarily be taken to teach you the halacha. It's meant to give you a deeper appreciation for the meaning behind the things that we're doing already, and you should take it in that way. And basically this shir is based just on a few paragraphs out of a Maamer here in Derech Mitzvotecha. This is a Maamer that I first learned 24 years ago in yeshiva in Los Angeles, in high school basically. It was a part of the classic curriculum that we learned in yeshiva Ketana in yeshiva in Los Angeles. And there's just a few paragraphs in here that from these paragraphs they shed a deeper light really on everything that has to do with hair, hair covering, beards, all this kind of things that have to do with hair. That from this really comes out a revolutionary understanding and what these things mean. It's so different than what's generally taught in the public, let's say. So this material is just basically taking a few paragraphs from something that I was zocheh to in yeshiva 20-something years ago, and just really basically unpacking it and seeing how it applies to different things. It's not something that you'll find written systematically anywhere. And in some parts of what I'm going to say are just reading and translating. Some parts are how I understand it. If something sounds wrong or doesn't seem to be correct to you, please don't think that it's chassidus that's, saying something strange. It's probably that I misunderstood it or overinterpreted it. That's very possible. Because I'm going to make some extrapolations in this shir that are just according to how it seems to me, and you can accept them or throw them out, okay? So that's the basic idea. So let's start in these source sheets that you have. I just brought one source here from the Shulchan Aruch, from Halacha, which is basically, it's one line, which is the core source of why women cover their hair. Okay, right on the top from Shulchan Aruch, Even Ezer 21:2. It's quoting from Chazal. It says, "Lo telachna benois Yisrael pruos rosh v'shuk, achas penuya v'achas eshes ish." Jewish girls, Jewish females, should not go in the shuk, in other words, in public, with their hair wild, which is usually interpreted to mean uncovered, whether they're married or whether they're single. Okay? That's what it says in Shulchan Aruch. So you might think, according to this, that a single girl also has to cover her hair. And by the way, you should know that there were countries where single girls did cover their hair, in some Middle Eastern countries. But the halacha is not generally that way. It's certainly today, there's almost no community in the world that paskins that way, and single girls don't cover their hair. So the source of it, there's many commentaries, but I just picked one because they all say basically the same thing. I picked the Be'er Sheva, which is just a very common commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. On the word pnuya, I put it in bold, he jumps out, he says, pnuya, a single girl has to cover her hair? What are you talking about? We never heard of such a thing. So he says, what does it mean, pnuya? Hainu almana o grusha o bu'ula. We're talking about a widow, or a divorcee, or a girl who's not married but had a relationship with a man. Okay? Those are three categories of women who are single, and they have to cover their hair, according to Halacha. A widow, that seems like something we're used to seeing. If, God forbid, a woman's husband passed away, she generally continues to cover her hair. Grusha, divorcee, also, it's pretty common. In Halacha, there are heterim sometimes given, that some people are soimechan, that if they get divorced and they're having difficulty finding a shidduch, there's a heter of Rav Moshe Feinstein in certain situations that they are allowed to not cover their hair, but that's a complicated topic you know we won't go into. One that we may not be so used to is the third one here, Bu'ula. A woman who had a relationship with a man and she's not married. Okay? She just had an illicit relationship. Technically, according to Halacha, she has to cover her hair. Now, you'll never see such a thing happen, but technically that's the Halacha. Okay? And this is very interesting because when we understand in chassidus what the meaning of the hair is and why women cover their hair, you'll understand why that is the halacha in theory, even though in practice nobody keeps it. The Mishnah Berurah brings this halacha that a girl who had an illicit relationship has to cover her hair, and he says, this is the halacha, but you can't, there's no way to force anybody to keep it, but if such people would listen to the Rabbanim, they would cover their hair. But those are the people who don't listen to the Rabbanim, so they're not going to cover their hair, okay? So that's why we don't see it in actuality, but in theory, and that's a very interesting halacha. And then he says something really way out there. It seems completely out of left field. He says, anusa, a woman who, God forbid, is raped, coerced, tzricha lechasa esroisha, she also has to cover her hair. V'chol shaloi nivala, and any woman who didn't have relations with a man, afshin iskadsha, even though she's been engaged, like she was given a ring, but she didn't yet consummate the relationship, muteres leilech b'priyas roish kishar b'sulah, she's allowed to keep her hair uncovered. So we see here just in halacha, the thing that causes the single girl to have to cover her hair is that she had a relationship with a man, a physical relationship. This caused her to now have to cover her hair. Before that, she does, and it doesn't matter married, not married, engaged, not engaged. It doesn't matter the status of the relationship. It's this technical act that caused her all of a sudden to have to cover her hair. That's how the halacha is. Now, guys, let's just talk in common terms, in general terms. When women go to different classes and they learn about hair covering, or when we teach, women who are learning about Torah, Balos Tshuva, why we cover the hair. What are some of the reasons that are typically given that you've heard? What are some examples of reasons of why women have to cover their hair when they're married? Yeah?
At the chuppah, Hashem's Kedusha comes into her hair or something like that?
At the chuppah. But technically you don't have to cover your hair under the chuppah. Okay?
I'm just saying that's
I just want to point out that she raised her hand. That was very
Thank you, first of all, for being brave. Thank you.
She's like...
Thank you for being brave and being the first one to open your mouth. I hope now everyone else will feel more comfortable. What other reasons have you heard? Don't feel bad to get it wrong, because actually I'm going to show you why a lot of these don't make so much sense, and hopefully we'll have a better explanation at the end. But I want you to tell me what people say. what is said out there.
I think the most common one people say is that it should be special for your husband, which is not really.
Or to show that you're married.
Okay, hold on. I heard two.
But nowadays, shekels look so real.
I heard two reasons here. Let's go through these. You said that it's
I
often
think most
said
people think that it's because your hair
something to keep special for your husband, right? Okay, that's something very commonly said.
Right.
Let's put that in the list. You said to show that you're married,
Yeah, that's
right?
why some people just put like a
Hairband.
That it's like a siman, like that you're married, so that for tznius, in other words, that in a relationship, someone shouldn't try to start to get involved with that woman or something, thinking she's single and maybe she'll marry him. He knows right away. It's like a wedding ring or something that shows that she's married. What are the reasons are said?
I heard that it's like the idea of tzitzis are supposed to remind a man that he's supposed to behave in a certain kind of way, conduct himself in a certain way, and that in a way, like wearing a sheitel, you can never, no matter how comfortable it is, you never forget that you're wearing it. And so it's to remind, stimulate you to remember this is how I would conduct myself of being, a from married woman.
Okay, so you're saying, in case people didn't hear it on the video, that it's like a sign for the woman, kind of like how men wear tzitzis to remind them to keep the mitzvot. It's a sign for the woman to remind herself that she's married when she is out and about, that she can't forget it because she has a sheitel or a tichel or something on her head that reminds her. So that's like the flip side of the coin of the reason that Rivki said, which is to remind other people, to like a sign to other people that she's married. This is like the other side of the coin to remind her that she's married, okay? Two sides of the same coin, but it's basically the same concept, let's say, on both sides. Are there any other reasons that you've heard out there why women cover their hair?
I know people that are saying that if you have like very short hair, like if you shave your hair, then you don't need to cover it because you don't have hair.
Okay, so
like not completely bald, but like not long.
So the basis of that is because the lashon of Chazal is lo telachna b'nois Yisrael pruos rosh. Jewish women should not go, or Jewish girls should not go with their hair wild. So you could feasibly interpret that to say, but if your hair is very short, it's not wild. Okay, and there are those who try to make those kind of arguments, but let's not get into the halachic ramifications, if there is something to that or not, because it's beyond my pay grade. I'm not a Rav, I'm just a guy who learned a Maamer and is explaining it. That's all, okay?
And there's always the people that say that women are more beautiful with their natural hair.
Okay, so
I haven't seen the sheitels that I've seen.
So Miko is saying a common one is that the hair is something very beautiful. It attracts the eye, and there's some sort of quality to the hair that it makes a woman very attractive that has to be covered. Okay? That's another reason which is said. Even in some halachic literature, this is the reason that's given for hair covering. Okay? That it's attractive, and therefore it has to be covered in order to keep people from, just like any part of the body which is supposed to be covered, the hair should be covered in a similar way. It would be comparing the hair to the thighs or to the neckline or anything like that that's supposed to be covered for modesty. Okay? And in general, I think when people talk about hair covering, they talk about it in the category heading of modesty, of tznius, right? It's like an aspect of tznius is covering the hair. I think when we're done with the sections from the Maamer that we're going to learn, maybe we're going to see that you may or may not call it tznius, but at least if it's tznius, it's not in the standard way that we think of tznius, like not to attract people's attention or whatever. Okay? So those are the reasons. Those you guys summed them up in some notes that I wrote years ago on this year. I wrote 3 categories of reasons that people give. The hair is sensual and can distract men, let's say, like other parts of the body. A married woman's hair is something special that she keeps only for her husband. We sort of heard that one in the beginning. And covering the hair shows everyone that this woman is married, or shows herself, reminds herself that she's married. These are basically the reasons that you guys came up with. It's exactly the ones I wrote on my notes years ago when I was preparing this year the first time. Now, every one of these answers, if we go through them one by one, we're going to find that they don't not really satisfying. Okay, they're not only are they not only always not completely satisfying, but every one of them doesn't really add up with how the halacha works. They don't justify the halachic practice. They justify some aspect of it, but then they don't justify the other aspects of it. Okay, let's go through them. Okay, hair is sensual and it can distract men, like it's tznius, like covering, any other part of the body. Is that really true? Let's just think in a very simple way.
As a single person.
Right, let's just think in a very simple way.
Right.
A 90-year-old bubby, okay, has to cover her hair, and a 20-year-old fashion model doesn't have to cover her hair. How does that have, if the hair is somehow something that attracts men or gives them bad thoughts, or it's somehow, immodest to show your hair, every girl from the age of 3 should have to cover her hair, like all other halachas of tznius. And by the way, because of that, trying to be consistent in that logic, that's why there were communities where they made girls cover their hair from the age of 3, mostly in the Islamic countries. Yes.
Well, like in a lot of Haredi communities, the idea of the wild hair, girls aren't allowed to just let their hair be hanging out.
Very good.
They have
So
to keep it in a braid,
So
which is to...
in halacha, because it says lo telachna benot yisrael pruot rosh, that a Jewish girl should not go with her hair wild, in the more Haredi communities, the custom is either to keep single girls' hair relatively short, like shoulder length or shorter, and if it's longer than that, to tie it up in some way, either with braids or with bands or some way to tie it up and keep it gathered and not wild, okay? Because it says that a Jewish girl should not go with wild hair, pruot rosh, okay? So without getting to the halacha, there is that concept, but still, why this girl, she can go with her hair less than shoulder length or tied in a ponytail, and the second she gets married, it has to be covered, okay? It doesn't, if it's for modesty, it doesn't really make so much sense that all of a sudden there's a different standard for how it's covered, okay? There is the idea that a woman's hair is for her husband, okay? It's something only for her husband to see and nobody else. This is something that's spoken about very much, okay? But how does that fit with the famous story that everyone is told about hair covering?
The 4 walls.
About Kimchis, yes, Kimchis, right? Who the Chachamim asked her, how did you have a son who became a Kohen Gadol? And she answered, I never let the walls of my house see my hair. Certainly her husband never saw her hair. And actually our minhag in Chabad is and amongst Chassidim in general, and most Charedim, is the women are supposed to keep their hair covered even in front of their husband, even when they're sleeping, etc., etc. So what does this mean? That it's something special only for her husband to see. And by the way, other women are allowed to see it when she's getting her hair cut and things like that. It doesn't really, it doesn't really fit exactly with how hair covering is done in actuality. So it's not a totally satisfying answer. The third one that we discussed is that hair is a sign of a married woman, either for herself or for the world around her, or both, or whatever. To me, this might be one of the most compelling approaches, like one of the approaches that feels the most, let's say, healthy and not oppressive, and just sort of saying, like, you get married, you moved into a new status, this is like a sign of your new status, that you're married. It reminds you of that you're a wife. It reminds people around you that you're married, like a wedding ring or something like that, okay? But it doesn't add up completely, because think about it. A widow continues to, a divorcee continues to cover. In theory, God forbid, in halacha, if a woman is raped, she's supposed to start covering her hair in theory, even though nobody does it, okay? None of these things add up with the idea that it's something that's a sign to her and the world around her, that she's married. It's just the opposite. Even if she's not married, even if she's looking to get married, she still has to cover her hair in certain circumstances. And she has to find a heter I've met divorced women who they really wanted to not cover their hair because they felt it's inhibiting them finding a shidduch, and they had to go to different rabbanim to get a heter, and they said only when you go on dates you could uncover it, and all kinds of things like that. Without getting into the halachic aspect of it, basically she still has to cover her hair, and it's inhibiting her getting married, and she might still have to cover her hair, and there might be only very specific heterim to do something different. So it doesn't really add up so much, all of these reasons. To me, when I hear all of these reasons, none of them are that satisfying intellectually to me, and I don't know how satisfying they are to women emotionally. Maybe some of them sort of like quiet the discomfort or whatever, but if you stop and you think it through, does it add up? Not so much, okay? Not so much. So what I want to do with you guys is to study a section of a Maamer. This Maamer is from Derech Mitzvotecha, Sefer of the Tzemach Tzedek, okay, third Lubavitch Rebbe. He goes through a portion of the mitzvahs of the Torah, and first brings the halachic definition, then according to the Arizal, the Kabbalistic, how it works with the Sfirot, and then he explains it according to chassidus. And this Maamer that we're going to learn a small section of, maybe like a fifth of it or something like that, is the part that I cut and pasted here on these sheets that you have. It's like a page, let's say, on these sheets. Bottom 2/3 of this page, and then the third of the next page. It's like a quarter or a fifth of the Maamer. This is the relevant sections that from this we're going to sort of have an explanation, not only maybe of why women cover their hair, and what it means spiritually, but actually more than that, why men grow their beards and their Peyos, why there's such a concept as a nazir, why boys till the age of 3 grow their hair and then shave it off. Okay? But before we start with this section, I want to read you sort of something that I wrote here, okay? Which is, think about the crazy, almost schizophrenic way that we seem to deal with hair in the Jewish religion. Okay? From the... What's that?
Can't cut it, have to cut it, cover it, don't
right.
cover it.
Okay?
Don't cut it.
Let's start with men, okay? Let's start with men. From the time he's born, we don't cut his hair. Until he turns 3, and then we shave it off. Except for the Peyos, okay, which we leave long, right? And then he grows older, he gets a beard, and he's never allowed to shave the beard or the Peyos with a razor at least, right? But that he has to grow long, like a hippie almost or something. But we discourage him from growing the hair of his head long because it looks disheveled, okay? And it's kind of compared to a Kohen who in the temple, in the Beis HaMikdash, the Kohen is not allowed to serve with his hair disheveled, let's say, right? But that same Kohen, or that same man, if he wants to be super holy, what does he do? He takes a vow of being a nazir, and then he grows his hair long. What's going on over here, right? The Kohen in the Beis HaMikdash can't grow his hair. If he didn't get a haircut in 30 days, he can't enter the Beis HaMikdash. But the nazir, who wants to be super holy, never cuts his hair until his nazirus is over. That's with men, right? Also, men are not supposed to shave their body hair because it's like a woman, right? They're not supposed to shave the hair of their legs and things like that because it would be like a woman. But the Levi, before he can serve in the Beis HaMikdash, it was a one-time thing in the Mishkan, actually, in the Midbar, had to shave all the hair off their body. Their eyebrows, their legs, their arms, everything. All the hair off their entire body. Eyelashes, everything.
Oh, really?
Had to be shaved off.
Wait, that's just...
It was a one-time event in the Mishkan, the Leviim.
I don't understand. Why didn't it continue?
It was a one-time event to consecrate them into the service.
Okay.
It seems to be totally schizophrenic, right? That's just with a man. then women are allowed to show their hair and everything, and then they get married and they're supposed to cover it. It's actually much more simple. In other words, there's a lot more. The Torah is a lot more concerned with the hair of men than it is with women. Actually, with women, it just has one thing: when you get married, or at a certain point, you start covering your hair. That's it. It's very simple. Men, there's the upsherin and the beard and the Peyos and the Levim and the Kohanim
The nazir.
and the nazir and all these things, right? Women, it's very simple.
It's much more complicated for guys.
It's very simple. So hopefully what we're going to see, and I don't know how much this we'll get through tonight. We'll probably have to continue with the second class. Hopefully what we're going to see is that there is a method to the madness, that there is some sort of Seder in all of this. It has a reason to it, okay? And I want to just maybe explain it in very general terms without reading the Maamer, and then we'll read the Maamer. Because I'm afraid once we start reading the Maamer, some people will get, it's a little bit complicated. It's a little bit like maybe difficult material to some extent. And I'm afraid that if some people get lost, they'll walk away with nothing at the end of the night, just all the questions. There's a sefer the Rambam wrote called Maamer Nevuchim. And the famous saying they say is that you should be very careful about studying Maamer Nevuchim. It's a book of philosophy. It asks a lot of questions on the Torah and then explains how the Torah fits well with philosophical principles. But first it starts by asking questions and showing what seems to be a problem in the Torah before it shows that actually it makes sense. So they say the problem with learning Maamer Nevuchim is if you study it and you fall asleep after you only read the question, before you get to the answer, you might wake up a heretic in the morning. So we just basically asked a lot of questions and basically showed that all the reasons that people maybe base their idea of hair covering on don't make so much sense. If we walk away without any kind of insight into what's going on over here, that's not good. So let's talk about it in very general terms, and then we'll go into the Maamer. The basic concept that we're going to see in this Maamer is that according to chassidus, hair is something which is not just very important symbolically. Hair plays a very important role in Seder Hishtalshalus. It plays a very important role in how energy in the world is transmitted. Okay? The pasuk, which is always brought, and all the Maimarim that speak about this, it's a pasuk from Sefer Daniel that you have in your source sheet on the second page. Okay? The last line on the second page. From Sefer Daniel, Perek Zion, chapter 7. It's talking about a vision of, so to speak, Hashem. Of course, nobody sees Hashem, but then Sefer Daniel speaks about a sort of metaphoric vision of Hashem, and Hashem is referred to as Atik Yomin. Here it says the Ancient of Days in this section of Sefer Daniel is in Aramaic. That's why I didn't bother to just bring the whole section in the original, because most of us, myself included, would break our teeth on many of the words there. It's Babylonian Aramaic, not even the kind that those who study Talmud and stuff like that use. And most of the words are difficult. But he speaks of seeing the Ancient One of Days, whose raiment, his garment, was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like clean wool. His throne was sparks of fire, its wheels were a burning fire, a river of fire was flowing and emerging from before him. 1,000 served him, and 10,000 arose before him. Justice was established, and the books were opened. In Aramaic, Va'atik yoimin yasiv, levushe kislag chivar, us'areshe ka'imar naka. Okay? Atik yomin was sitting, his garment was white, like white snow, and the hair of his head was like clean wool. So what we see is that in this metaphoric vision of Hashem, so to speak, that Daniel has, Hashem has hair. Metaphorically speaking, whatever that means, okay? I wouldn't dare to say such a thing if it wasn't basically just quoting from Sefer Daniel. Hashem, metaphorically, at least in the way that he encloses himself in the spheroids and interacts with the world, there is a certain level of his manifestation that is referred metaphorically to as hair. Of course, Hashem doesn't have any parts. When we speak of Hashem's hand taking us out of Egypt, he doesn't have a hand. When you speak about his voice, he doesn't have a mouth. But we do speak of these things metaphorically because they correspond to ways that he interacts with the creation, let's say. And so one of these ways is referred to as hair. And it says in chassidus, based on the writings of the Arizal, that all of the creation hangs from the hair of Atika Kadisha. He didn't like someone saying Hashem has hair.
I think he didn't like the noise.
I think he found that
I know he was
heretical.
He was offended.
Okay, so the Kabbalists write that all of the creation metaphorically hangs from the hair of Atik Yomin. You see here Hashem is referred to as Atik Yomin. Atik Yomin is also in Kabbalah referring to what's called the Pnimius HaKeser, one of the highest levels of creation and the process of creation. Keser being above all the 10 series, and it has the external part and the internal part. Atik Yomin is the internal part. And so to speak, all of the creation hangs from the hair of Atik Yomin. Okay? What does that mean, all of the creation hangs from the hair of Atik Yomin? So what we're going to see in the Maamer is that hair is both a metaphor and also it's a kind of tool that brings about tzimtzum, contraction of energy. You see, one of the basic concepts of chassidus is that Hashem is Ein Sof. He's bli gvul. He's completely infinite. And in order to create something else, he had to conceal himself. He had to make it tzimtzum. The tzimtzum, the contraction, it's a way of basically making it look as if there's no God. Or at least allowing us to tell ourselves that. Live in a world where it's possible to tell yourself that. And the ultimate purpose of all the tzimtzumim that happen in the creation is to give us bechira chavshis, free will. All the tzimtzumim, all the process of creation that's spoken about in chassidus, it all is just coming to one point, which is to take our neshama, which is a chelik elokah, it's broken off from Hashem himself, and put it in a body, in a world where it looks like Hashem is not here, and we have to seek him. We have to try to see him. We have to try to find him. And we have the right and the ability, actually, to live our entire life denying he even exists, and no one will even call you insane. There are people in the world who, with a straight face, say they don't believe in God. And they don't lock them up and put them in a mental institution. Even though, at that very moment, Hashem is animating every cell in their body, every atom in the universe around them, causing their heart to beat, their lungs to breathe. And if for one moment he would stop to actively create them, they and everything that exists would cease to be, as if it never was. But there's so much Helen Vehester, there's so much concealment through the Tzimtzum, that we have the ability to actually live in this world and tell ourselves there's no God. Or to forget for a moment that there's a God and act against his will, because we're not thinking about it at the moment, okay? And that gives us the ability of bechira chavshis, of free will. And only when we have free will can we serve Hashem in a true way. Because we want to, because we love him and we fear him. And that's what Hashem wanted. He wanted creations that could love him and fear him and serve him and interact with him because they want to. Not because they're overwhelmed with his greatness and couldn't even think about going against him for a moment. So that's what all the tzimtzumim are about. And hair is a metaphor for part of this process of tzimtzum. Hair actually represents a super strong kind of tzimtzum. Okay? Because think about what is hair. the most hair on the body of any human being grows on their head. If it's on women and men on their skull, on their scalp, on men also on their face, okay? But on their head is where the most hair grows by far. What is the head? It's where the brain is. Now think about what is the most crucial part of a human being that is irreplaceable? Only their brain. All other parts in theory could be transplanted. Maybe there's some they haven't figured out how, but if they would transplant your heart, you'd still be the same person. If they would transplant your arms, your legs, your lungs, you'd still be the same person. The only part of you which is irreplaceable is your brain. That's what's called the Mishkan HaNefesh. It's the place where the soul lives, is in the brain. So you could say that the brain is the most alive part of the human being. It's the part which is the most alive, the most crucial to life. Now what is the most dead part of the human being? The hair. The hair, right? It's the most dead part of the human being. To the extent, the first time you take a kid to get a haircut, sometimes they scream and kick because they're afraid it's going to hurt. Because any other part that you cut, it hurts. They can't imagine that you could cut something off of them and it's not going to hurt.
Nails.
Right?
Well,
even the nails, if you
sometimes
cut
they
too
complain
far
about
or
that.
whatever, right?
Sometimes they complain about that.
The nails are more, let's say, closely connected to the person and the hair. But you're right, nails is the next level from hair. Okay? Nails also represent tzimtzum and things like that, but it's a little bit less than the hair, let's say. That's why there's also halachas about nails. Not growing them too long, cutting them before certain things, not cutting them at other times, not leaving them laying around, because nails are similar to hair in many ways.
Is
Okay?
there halacha about getting rid of the hair that we've cut off? Because obviously we know that there are about nails, but it just made me think.
It's an interesting question. I'm not familiar. We throw ours out in the garbage, but interesting question. Okay?
Yeah, exactly.
If anybody sees this video and they're aware of anything, let us know. Message us, okay? So anyways, what that means is that here in the brain you have the most alive part of the person, and basically growing out from the brain is the most dead part of the person, the hair. How does that happen? There's nothing in between. You would think there needs to be some sort of process, like from the brain, it should go to the spinal cord, and that should feed like the arms, and then the legs, and then out of the fingertips should grow hair. Like if it's a proper Seder Hishtalshelus, a proper order of descent from the strongest to the weakest, from the most alive to the least alive, the hair should grow out of the tips of the toes or something like that. And in fact, we do have a sort of hair that we call nails that grows off the tips of our fingers and the tips of our toes. So that does show a proper Hishtalshelus from the brain to the nervous system, out to the limbs, and then at the very external part of the limbs, on the edge, you have the nails growing. That makes sense. But hair growing out of the brain doesn't make sense. It's too strong. It's too drastic. How did it get from here to there with nothing, there's all there is in between is the bone and the skin of the skull, but there's no nerves that feed from the brain to the hair or anything like that. How did that happen? Okay? It doesn't fit. And so in Kabbalah and in chassidus, the hair basically represents a drastic tzimtzum from a very high level down to a very low, very concealed level without the process in between. A very drastic tzimtzum. And so that's why we say that all the world is nurtured, all the world nurses, so to speak, from the hair of Atik Yomin. Okay? What does that mean? In order for Hashem, Atzmos, the essence of God, or even on the level where he's called Atik Yomin in Keser, to be able to create the world, he has to do a drastic tzimtzum, which is metaphorically referred to as his hair, so to speak. And out the other side of the hair comes the energy, this tiny little bit of life. Because is the hair alive or is it not? Well, maybe you could say there's a tiny bit of life force in your hair, because after all, it's growing and it's attached. So there is, at least until you cut it off, maybe you could say there's some sort of life energy in the hair, although it's very minimal. So to go from Hashem, the way he's called Atik Yomin, the Ancient of Days, to go from that to a physical world, you have the tzimtzum of the hair, so to speak, okay? And that's the energy that feeds the world. So the hair all of a sudden is not just something interesting, an oddity on our body to keep our head warm or whatever reasons they explain, according to evolutionary theories and things like that. But the hair is actually a spiritual conduit of sorts to constrict energy and to allow the energy out into the world. Were you scratching your face, or was that... Oh, okay.
This may be completely tangential, but I don't know. But just talking about being, the world being connected to the hair of the Atzmach. Reminds me of something about Reb Nachman of Breslov said.
Yeah.
That he wanted his chassidim to grow their payas.
Then they'll hang on to his pants.
So that no matter what happens, whatever depth of Gehinnom that they would find themselves in,
He'll grab
be able
them.
to pull them out from.
So you're saying maybe it works the other way also?
Yeah.
That's such a crazy thing.
Look, I've never studied Breslov chassidus in depth, only very superficially, so I don't have an opinion about it. But it's an interesting thought that those who study Breslov chassidus could maybe use it as a jumping off point to develop it further. Okay, but it's an interesting thought. So basically, what comes out is, since human beings, we're made in the image of Hashem, right? The man is made in the image of Hashem. So if Hashem has spiritual, metaphoric, kavayachol, different body parts which represent different levels of energy, that come out, and the hair of his head, so to speak, represents this immense tzimtzum of the energy out. So man, who is created in God's image, the different hair on different parts of our body also has a corresponding spiritual role that it plays, or spiritual outcome that comes out of the different hair on different people in different areas. And it's not just cells or, material that's growing out of our head. It has a spiritual energy to it. That's the first thing we need to understand. All hair has a spiritual energy to it, and this is why the Torah is concerned with it. The question is, why do we have such different... Is hair good or is hair bad? That's the question. Okay? Is it good or is it bad?
Well, another random example of hair is inside the tefillin.
Maybe we'll mention that later. There's hair sticking out of the tefillin. That's Go ahead.
Okay, is it good and is it bad? One of the things about a nazir, that at the end of his nazir,
He has to shave it.
he has to shave the hair off. He has to also bring
Carbonas.
carbonas for sin.
Right. For
because-
refraining from wine and all
and,
the...
and abstaining from the community and
Right.
so on like that.
Yes.
So, but attached with that, emblematically, is the whole hair thing. So
Right.
it's good.
It's also a little bit paradoxical, let's say.
Right, because you're
He's
saying
praised, but he's also criticized.
to become the most holy, you were saying, and then at the end of it, he has to bring a sin offering. So,
But his hair is called holy in the Torah. Kodesh Yia Gidul Pera, something, if I might be quoting the pasuk slightly off, but basically the growth of his hair is holy, the Torah says. Okay? So, really what we're going to find in the Maamer is the following. Hair always does the same thing. It takes whatever spiritual level it grows out from, and it brings it down big time. If it's growing out from a place that the energy that's manifest in that place is strong enough or high enough that what comes out at the other end can still be beneficial, then it's left to be grown and exposed and we don't touch it, generally speaking. The beard is an example, the Peyos is an example. We'll get into what is the level and what is all of that, but okay?
I don't understand.
Think of the hair as a step-down transformer of sorts. Okay? You have a socket 220 volts. You want to plug in your iPhone, right? So, you have this transformer that contracts the electricity down to 5 volts or whatever goes into the
Be
iPhone.
able to receive the actual.
If you would plug the iPhone straight into the wall and with a regular plug, it would explode. It wouldn't be an iPhone anymore. It would be a brick, a doorstop, okay? So what you have is something that contracts it. And now what comes out, 5 volts of electricity, is beneficial for the iPhone. So that's great. We plug it in. But if that same thing would be plugged into, let's say, 10 volts, what would come out wouldn't be useful. Now, in this case, the metaphor doesn't stand up because it also wouldn't necessarily be damaging or wouldn't be something we're afraid of necessarily. But let's just say that it wouldn't be useful at least, okay? So hair is the same thing. If the hair is growing out of Atik Yomin, of Hashem's Kaviyachal hair of Atik Yomin, what comes out the other end is energy powerful enough to nourish all of creation. That's wonderful. So that hair is flying loose, nourishing all of creation. Okay? If the hair is coming out of someone who has tsaras, for example, that's on a very low level, when they become tahar, they have to shave all that hair off because the energy that's coming out of that hair is not good. It's a contraction of a very low level. And so it's like a negative, bad energy that's growing out. And when they finish having tsaras, they have to shave off the hair. The question is why they're not allowed to shave it until after they become tahar. That's an issue that Maamer will talk about. But in the end, when they're done, they have to shave it off. Okay? And then there are all kinds of levels in between. That based on the level where the hair comes out from, we don't shave it off, but we keep it short and keep it under control, or we cover it, or whatever. Okay? All different levels in between. And what we're going to see in the Maamer is what is each of these levels and why the ramification of the energy that comes out from the other side of that hair brings about the type of behavior of how we behave with that hair. Okay? What time is it, by the way?
9:06 and 53 seconds.
Okay, we'll go a little bit more and then we'll see if we get into the Maamer. Okay. So, let's just start reading a little bit in the Maamer. On the first page of these sheets I gave you out where it says Derech Mitzvotecha Tiglachat Metzorah. So again, this is just sections that I cut out of the Maamer that are relevant to our discussion. Ha'inyan. Ki ine metzinu b'Torah pam higbia maila sasaros b'me'oid. We find that sometimes the Torah proclaims very greatly the advantage of hair. It makes it into something very special. Kumo ben nazir, like we find by the nazir. Kodesh yeh gadol pera sa'ar roshay. Holy shall be the wild growth of the hair of his head. That's a quote from the Torah. We have the famous story of Shimshon Hagibor. All the power that he got was only from his hair, and when it was cut, the power would go away. These are examples of hair being not only not bad, but super beneficial. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, pa'amim mitzinu shasaras hishpilo esam Torah ma'od. Sometimes we find that the Torah treats hair in a very degraded way and treats it as something very bad. Kenal binyan ha'metzorah va'levim. The examples are someone who has tsaras, or the Levim when they were entered into the service in the Mishkan, that they had to shave all their hair off. V'chen, or another example, which is not quite as extreme, but let's say it's in that category. Amru Zal, the rabbis of blessed memory said, Sa'ar be'isha erva. A married woman's hair is erva, it's nakedness, or it's immodest, let's say. V'chen l'mayla ba'olam v'selyonim yeshgam ken chilukim. Also above, that's in the halachic aspect, in the physical world. And physical people. We see some hair, it's treated holy, some hair not. Also above in the spiritual worlds, there are also differences. Kisara is the atika kedisha, ayin kuf is atika kedisha. the hair of Atika Kadisha, hem makor chayos kol ha'olamos. They are the source of the life of all the worlds. Ki Abba Reishis Ha'atzilus, Abba, which is Chachma, the first of the 10 spheres, Chachma ben Das Chesed Gvur Tiferes Nesachod Yesod Malchus, the highest of the spheres, Chachma, in Atzilus, Yoinek Mimazal Hashmini Kenoida. It nurses from what's called the 8th Mazal, which is referring to Hashem Kel Racham V'Chanun. You have 13 midas, right? So the 8th one is called Kel Rachum V'Chanun Erech Hapayim V'Rav Chesed V'Emes Noitzer Chesed. The 8th one is called Noitzer Chesed. Okay, it's called the Mazal Ashmini. The 8th one Noitzer Chesed, and it says that Chachma gets all of its energy from the 8th Mazal. But what are these 13 attributes? They're called the 13 attributes of the beard. They're called in Kabbalah Yud Gimel Tikkunei Dikna. The 13 tikkunim of Dikna is Zaken, the beard. So to speak, the supernal beard of Atik Yomeh, right, has 13 tikkunim. And the 8th one is the source of all the energy of the Sefer, of the Sphira of Chachma V'Atzilus. So wow, this is like a huge thing that from hair of a spiritual beard, all of the creation gets its energy. Okay? Mashen Ken, Saras de Nukva, the hair that comes out from the spiritual level of Nukva, of Malchus, Yeshmem Yenikas Chitzonim. It's spoken about in the spiritual realm that Chitzonim can nurse from that. Chitzonim referring to extraneous spiritual energies. Okay? What does that mean, extraneous spiritual energies? In the physical world, we have things which are pnimius and things which are chitzonius to our will. Let's say, for example, when you go grocery shopping and you stock your shelves and you cook a meal, you have the pnimius why you did it. The pnimius is you want your spouses to eat, your children, your guests. You want to feed them food so that they'll have energy to live and do all the good things that they want to do. That's the pnimius of why you have food in your house. Then there's the chitzonim who also get the food. Who are the chitzonim? Maybe a cat snatches something. Maybe ants come and take something away. Okay? When you're done, you throw scraps out and there's rats or whatever in the garbage that get some of it. Right? There's also what we expel from our body that ends up, wherever. There's all kinds of chitzonim that also latch onto that food and get it. Now, some of it is not the end of the world. If some sugar falls on the ground and some ants take some of the sugar and they don't get into the bag, no big deal, okay? They also need to eat something. But what happens if the ants start to crawl up into the cabinets or get in your fridge and they start to eat the food?
I'm gonna have nightmares tonight.
Well, what that means is,
You didn't have that, you're lucky.
It's so hard to
what that means is that now,
no, on the couch.
this place is immaculate. You're not going to have any ants here. And it's winter, so don't worry.
It's winter, but-
Maybe in the summer, not in the winter. No
Yeah,
chance.
no, in the summer there was once we left the house and we came back an hour later, but they're big ones. It's not like the little. It's like in
The
an
big
hour.
ones are not the
But
problem.
It was like a
It's the little ones
trail.
that were.
And
The
I was
big
like,
ones, you
where did
see
they
that.
come
The little
from?
ones-
An hour. They weren't there. They were on the counter. Like we would have noticed. And you kids were here. They're like, what is that? I was like, yeah.
If this goes viral, everyone's going to hear about your ants.
It was terrible. I know. I'm like traumatized by it. Ellie and I moved so fast. I've never seen us clean anything so fast. Get everything out.
So if I remember when we first made Aliyah, we lived in Tekoa. We weren't used to how things work here so much. And Miko was defrosting chicken or something in the kitchen. And every time she would leave chicken on the counter, cats would jump in the window and eat it.
They would
Okay?
open the screen.
No way.
Yeah, the cats know how to open the screen.
This is
I mean,
I always say
think
cats
it's
that you roll.
defrosting
I'm right.
crazy.
Now think about it. At that time, we were very poor. We were living on a very tight budget.
Cats, I apologize.
to buy a chicken, maybe that was the only protein we were feeding our family for the whole week. And instead of it going to our children and to us, it's going to some cats. That's what's called chitzonim. The chitzonim have a reason why they exist in the world. Imagine if, God forbid, all the ants in the world were wiped out. Everyone in all of humanity would die if all the ants were wiped out. Because the ants aerate the soil. They allow the roots to grow. They allow the plants to grow. Worms, okay? If there weren't worms, think about it. If there were no worms, nothing would ever decompose. The whole world would be full of corpses, of people, of animals. They would never decompose. If there weren't certain chitzonim, certain things that we never feed them on purpose, but thank God they're there, to clean up, let's say, the world. So nothing could exist without them. They're necessary for creation. They're a necessary part of the process, physically speaking, okay? The reason there's cats all over is to keep the rats away, okay?
Yeah, I think they're kind of...
Good question. Why are the cockroaches? I don't know. There are levels of chitzonim that are not necessary. They're like the lowest klipa that, let's say, they actually don't do any good. There is such a concept as well. But mostly when we speak of chitzonim, we're not talking about something that has no purpose. Okay, it has a purpose. Actually, the purpose is very important. We just don't want it inside, latching onto the source. Okay, for it to get the things which are thrown out, that's fine. In fact, it's desirable. But we don't want it to get inside to the domain or the realm that we've carved out of safety and, our home, our bodies, etc., etc. We don't want them to get in. We want them to be outside doing their job there. These are called chitzonim. They're meant to be outside. There's pnimim, things which are meant to be inside, which we invite inside and want inside. Our friends, our guests, our family, etc., etc. This is who we bring inside. And we feed them on purpose, and we intend to feed them. And we clothe them and house them on purpose, and we intend to. You throw out a banana peel, it becomes a home for all kinds of things that will move into it and shelter under it. But you're not trying to build homes for these worms and bugs. You're trying to build a home for your family, okay? So we have pnimios and chitzonios. So in the shefa that comes down, everything gets its parts. Everything gets its energy. But we, in order to be healthy, we have to carve out walls and boundaries. And within there, we have to try to keep as much of our energy as possible focused into the pnimim and not into the chitzonim. There's no way that you can live without somehow nourishing the chitzonim. There will always be a certain amount of nourishment that gives to chitzonim. But if you leave open sources of energy or of nourishment for the chitzonim to come into, and you don't close them off, then basically they will start to move in where they don't belong. That's the basic concept, what it's saying over here, that certain hair, specifically what's called saras of nukva, could become a source of nourishment for the chitzonim. So the general idea is, when do you get all kinds of infestations of things in your home, for example? When you leave crumbs and little things laying around. It's not when you have the food out on the table. That's not when they come. You can have a whole feast out on the table and you're not going to likely have ants. You're not going to likely have all these problems because the food is there, the people are there. Even though it's all out, they don't come. But you leave a few crumbs and they do come in a period of time. So there's an idea that when the energy is strong, it actually pushes away the chitzonim. When the energy is non-existent, the chitzonim don't come because there's nothing to come to. But when there's a little bit of energy that's left out, that's not supposed to be, that's what the chitzonim latch onto. And when they come for that, they might actually end up taking more than that. If they would just take the crumbs that fell on the floor, it wouldn't be the end of the world. But they might get into the cabinets and get into the other things, okay? So that's a sort of physical metaphor for a spiritual concept. The spiritual concept is when we're sitting and learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, we're not really afraid of the chitzonim latching onto that. We're not afraid of negative forces. Just like in the physical world, there are all kinds of creations. There are all kinds of spiritual creations. There are souls. There are angels, malachim. There are what are called shin dalet, sometimes translated as demons or things like that. All kinds of negative forces. And there's all different hierarchies of them. Okay? There's infinite numbers of these spiritual creations, and the positive side and the negative side and every part of it. We generally try not to say that word, but yes, okay. And because we say that even saying the word gives them some kind of koach, so we usually allude to it. But in any case, yes, there's all kinds of creations, and they exist. We don't see them, but they're all around us all the time. All of these creations are all around us. A person who, just like all around us, there's ants and mice and birds and cats. They're all around us. You don't go around afraid of them because you know how to manage your life to keep them at bay and to create a space that's safe from them. Okay? Now, in our world, on our house, we put mezuzahs. The mezuzah has on the outside the word Shin Dalet Yud, which is one of the names of Hashem, but it also stands for Shomer Daltot Yisrael. God guards the doors of Am Yisrael. But it's also brought that the name Shin Dalet Yud is Mavriach. It scares away the Shin Dalet. Okay? Shin Dalet Yud is the name of Hashem that has the word Shin Dalet in it, with the Yud, which forces away. So when we put mezuzah on our doors, it's almost like these forces come and they say, whoa, stay away. It's like a wall. It's a spiritual barrier that holds them at bay. Okay, the mezuzah. And inside, we study Torah, we do mitzvahs, we give tzedakah, we do all kinds of things that create, it's like a feast on the table. They're not coming for that. Okay? But there are all kinds of things that we could do that kind of leave spiritual crumbs out that attract these forces in. And if these forces latch on to the energy in our life, it's not like something like, that we should be afraid. There's all these things around us. But if these forces latch on to the energy in our life, it just distracts us from what we need to do. If you go to cook a meal and you find that the rice has bugs in it, or that a cat got into your chicken that you're defrosting, well, now you have to stop and go to the grocery store and buy something else. And now the time that you were going to use for something else was used dealing with this infestation, this physical infestation. So too in our avodas Hashem, there are certain things that can latch onto us and distract us from doing what we need to do. So that actually something that should be very simple and straightforward ends up being very involved and taking many attempts till it works through. And so what we're going to see in this Maamer is that the hair of some levels, the energy that comes out, it's like a feast at the table, so to speak. Of other levels, it's like crumbs or something like that. It's still an energy, it still is a nourishment, but it's just weak enough that it actually is problematic. And then there's some hair that the energy that comes out of it is almost like a kind of death or something like that. It's close to death, and we shave it off and get rid of it because it's actually just in the way altogether, let's say. Okay? That's what we're going to see. And in general terms, it comes out that men are on the level of Zer Anpin, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Chod, Yesod, the 6 spheres. They are a vessel for these 6 spheres primarily. All people have all of the spheres in them, but primarily this is what they are manifesting. Women are primarily corresponding to the sphere of Malchus. Malchus is the bottom of the spheres. Okay? On the other hand, women are rooted in Keser. Okay? So their role as Malchus is a role they play in the world. Their essence is on the level of Keser. But because Keser has the ability to permeate all the way down, the only way that it can permeate all the way down is when women play the role of Malchus, which is a kind of lower role, let's say, a role of subjugating themselves in a certain way. We see really throughout history, women were seen almost as a kind of necessary evil. If you look at medieval books, when they talk about women, I'm not talking about in the Jewish world, I'm talking about in the non-Jewish world, women were seen as a kind of necessary evil because only their role of Malchus was understood. It wasn't understood that their essence is Keser. It's actually higher than all of the other levels. And so it comes out that the role that women play on the level of Malchus, it happens to be a lower energy than the energy of Zah. So the man who has the energy of Zah, some of his hair is somewhat problematic. He's supposed to keep it short. Specifically, the hair of the beard and the Peyos still connects to a little bit higher level, and there is some benefit of the energy that comes out. The energy that comes out is still bringing some sort of good spiritual energy into the world that's beneficial. And therefore, he's not supposed to cut it. It brings a blessing, let's say. But before he reaches the age of 3, we let his hair grow. Why do we let his hair grow before he reaches the age of 3? Because there's a concept that you give to the chitzonim what they have to do. Hashem is zanu mefarnes lakol. Hashem gives sustenance to all creations, even to these kind of creations. And so where do they get their sustenance? There's certain things where we let them have the energy when it's not a problem to us. The child from birth, the boy from birth till age 3, he's not studying Torah. He's not doing mitzvahs. And so whatever energy is coming out of his hair right now is so minuscule that we say that's the hair that we let the klipos have. We let the klipos latch onto all of that hair, the chitzonim, let them have all of that energy that comes out.
Shaking the tablecloth outside. So
Yeah, it's so minuscule, let them have it. It's fine.
So
Because when he reaches 3, no, you could, but it doesn't matter. He doesn't understand enough. His mind isn't developed enough for it to take on. His mitzvahs are not technically mitzvahs, they're only chinuch. From the age of 3, it's also chinuch, but it's a different level. He understands. He could have some understanding of what he's doing. Of course, it gets more and more as he gets older. But the point is, I'll give you an example. There's a halacha in tefillin. You wrap the parshiot with hair. And you have to leave 2 or 3 hairs sticking out of the bite of the tefillin. Why? Because it says in the Zohar that if you don't leave 2 or 3 hairs sticking out, which to give the klipot, the chitzonim, a little piece of the energy of the tefillin, a minuscule part of the energy of the tefillin, when they see a Jew wearing tefillin, such a holy thing, they'll try to latch onto the whole thing and somehow make the tefillin puzzle, or somehow cause the person to be distracted from wearing the tefillin, or they'll look for ways to take the energy of this mitzvah. So what we do is we leave out a few hairs to let them get something. Al derech zeh, what's that?
What type of hair is it?
It's a cow, hair of any kosher animal, basically, but usually it's cow hair, of the tail of a cow, and preferably of a calf to be mechaper on the chet ha'egel, but that's a whole different discussion. So too, that's what the hair of the child from the age of birth is. We let it grow, and we say to the klipot, you want a piece of this kid, basically? You want a piece of him? Take everything you want right now. There's not much there for you, but you can have it. We give you what's yours. He reaches the age of 3, we shave it all off. We cut it very short. And we say, now you're done. You got your part, move on somewhere else. Now we're clearing you out, okay? It's like here in Israel, they had a problem at the fish farms because Israel is on a path of migratory birds. Hundreds of millions of birds migrate across Israel every year. So all the fish farms had a problem that the birds would eat all their fish. So they put nets over the fish farms. The birds would tear through the nets. Nothing worked. They would have to net it off so much that the fish would suffocate, okay? So then someone came up with an idea. For every 10 fish ponds, they made one small fish pond that they left uncovered, that they stocked with fish, with cheap fish, okay? And that was it. That was enough. They netted off 9, and they left one with the cheapest fish open. And the birds would eat there and go away and continue. And they didn't try to open up the other nets. Okay, this is something I studied as a tour guide. This is a solution that they developed in Israel. That's what the hair of the tefillin is like. That's what the hair of the boy before he turns 3 is like. This is also what the hair of a woman is like until she gets married or until she has a relationship with a man, so to speak. Okay? Because basically what happens is when a woman has a relationship with a man, she gets latched in now to the Seder Hishtalshalut. Until now, she was an independent entity who was sort of getting her energy from the side, let's say, independently. Now she latches into the path that goes down from Keter, down through Chochmah Bina Das, down through the man that she has a relationship with, Zah, down into Malchut. Now she has the ability to bear children that is impossible without the relationship with the man. As soon as that connection happens and she gets latched in, plugged into the system, now the energy that comes out of her hair is of consequence. It's similar to when the boy gets the sechel that he can start to study Torah. Now the energy that comes out is of consequence and it has to be dealt with. Now we cut it short on the boy. Now with the woman, we cover it, or we'll talk about why there's different opinions of how it has to be covered, or if it should be cut short or not, or some communities even the women shave their hair and then cover their hair. There's all kinds of things like that. But the basic thing is that when she now latches into the system, all of a sudden the energy that comes out becomes of consequence. Until then we say to all of the chitzonim, it's fine, the little bit of hair that's coming out, the little bit of energy that's coming out, enjoy. Eat to your heart's content of this energy and take it, because the time is going to come when we're going to close this channel off and you won't have access to it anymore. That's really what it's going to come down to when we study this Maamer. And this is what it says in the Maamer, what we just read, that from the level of Nukva, there can be a Nikah to Chitzonim. The Chitzonim can...
Does that suggest that the energy coming out of a 3.5-year-old boy who is still doing mitzvahs in a stage of chinuch, and not because he has a mitzvah, is being considered of more spiritual consequence than a girl who's over bas mitzvah and she's doing mitzvahs because she's being commanded to, but the energy coming from her hair is still of no
Each person, the energy that comes out of their hair becomes of consequence when they begin upon the path of their core mission in the world, so to speak. So for men, they embark upon the path of their core mission in this world when they start to study Torah. That's the primary mitzvah of the man, is to study Torah. Women are exempt, in theory, from Torah study. They're exempt from time-bound mitzvot, from many of the mitzvot, maybe most of the mitzvot in the Torah. Why? Because it could distract from their core mission, which is to nourish life, to give birth to other people and bring souls in the world and raise them and nourish them. And it's more, a woman's changing a diaper of a baby is more important than a man putting on tefillin, and that's why the woman doesn't have to put on the tefillin, because she has to be able to change the diaper. Okay? Because that thing is, it's higher actually. It's the essence of all existence. It's the essence of life. So, because the woman actually is rooted in Keser, in a very much higher level, but she has the bittul to bring it down into the world. The man, who is a little bit more in an external way, on a higher level, he's stronger, he goes out in the world and all of that, he's not able to be a vessel for that level, okay? And he can't bring it that far down, but the woman can. So the man, when does he embark on his core mission that he was created for? When he steps into the process of Torah study, the formal education of the mitzvot, the time-bound mitzvot, all these things, okay? Now he latches into, he plugs in to the system as it comes down. Now he's online, so to speak. He's come online in his core mission in life. The girl is still not come online in her core mission at 3. She's still in the preparatory stage. When she has a relationship with a man that has potential to bring life, she's come online in this system now. Okay? Once she comes online, now all of a sudden, the energy that is emanating out of her is of consequence. And what effect it has to be dealt with. Okay? So the boy comes online at 3, and we cut his hair short, except for the Peyos, and then as he gets older and grows a beard, we leave the beard, because those are the part that at his position on the chain of descent of the energy, there's still a beneficial energy that comes out. The woman, at her position, the energy that comes out is a sort of paradox. Okay, the paradox is, from the aspect that she's on the level of Malchus, which is the lowest level in all of the levels, from that aspect, the energy that comes out is very weak. It's not beneficial. It's not strong enough to be beneficial. It's only strong enough to be a draw to the chitzonim, to be an attraction to the chitzonim, let's say. Okay? But on the other hand, and this it doesn't say explicitly in the Maamer, but I think it seems to me clear from what it says in chassidus. On the other hand, from her core role, her true role, which is the level of keser, like it says, Eshes Chayla Teres Baila, okay, which is what she actually is, not just the role she plays. On that level, the energy that comes out of her hair could be very beneficial. Okay? It could actually be similar to the hair of the nazir in some ways, which is considered to latch into the level of keser. When a man takes a vow of nazirus, he gets elevated from the level of zat to the level of keser, similar to what a woman is all the time, but with him it becomes in a revealed way, not in a concealed way. Okay? And all of a sudden he has to grow his hair. The hair of the beard is from chitzonias hakeser, from what's called Erech Anpin, the 13 attributes of Erech Anpin. It's keser. So a man is not on the level of keser, but the one place where he has some connection to the level of keser is in his beard and his peyos. So he grows it. The woman is the vessel of the sphere of keser in this world, or the level of keser. It's above the spheres. But it's in a secret, concealed way. It's only revealed when Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, it says that the woman will be higher than the men, that Eshes Chala Teres Baila will be revealed, how the woman is above her husband, so to speak. So, but it exists now in a concealed way. But in a revealed way, the role that she plays is the role of Malchus. On that level, the energy that comes out is negative. So what is the halachic solution to this, basically? The halachic solution is she doesn't shave off her hair. She covers it. By covering it, it exists. Whatever secret, positive aspect of it radiates in the world and brings blessing exists in a concealed way. But the chitzonim have no access to it because the energy doesn't flow out into the world. And according to this explanation, actually what's so interesting about it is that this explanation that people give, why does a woman cover her hair? It's something special that she keeps for her husband or for her family or whatever. It's actually a true explanation, just not the way that people think it is. She keeps her hair and she covers it because it has a beneficial effect. Her hair is a conduit for the energy of Keser to come into the world, for some aspect of it to come into the world. Okay? But it has to be covered because until Mashiach comes, her role is the role of Malchus. And on that level, the Chitzonim want to latch onto it. And it could be a draw for the Chitzonim. Okay? So
when Mashiach comes, we don't have to cover our hair.
it could be, so when Mashiach comes, women won't have to cover their
I don't know how I'm
hair.
going to feel about
Okay.
it by then.
I
know.
A lot of gray.
Listen to what Mashiach.
It could be.
There's already a lot of gray now.
It could be. And by the way, this is really stretching it far because it doesn't say anything like this anywhere. But one time I was discussing this with Miko, okay, the first time I gave this year, we were talking about this idea, and she said, I wonder if that's why the Rebbe wanted women to wear shetels instead of tichels, okay? Because think about, what is a shetel? A shetel, it's made of hair. So if it's from an idea of tznius, well, the shetel could be more beautiful than the regular hair. So how is it modest? You know, lahavdil in the world, models often wear wigs because they can make their hair look better and even worse types of people wear wigs. Okay, so the wig isn't necessarily modest, let's say, right? And in fact, you see a big pushback in those schools of Torah thought that don't study Kabbalah and Chassidus. There's a big pushback against sheitos, and they say it's not tznius, you have to wear a tichel and all of that, right? But perhaps, just perhaps, think about the idea of what a sheitel is. A sheitel, it's hair. So we have a concept in Torah, the min b'mino enu chaytzetz. For example, if someone is wearing tefillin and they put a piece of paper between the tefillin and their arm, it's possible that they don't fulfill the mitzvah because they have a chatzitza. But if they put a piece of leather between, or the ritzua of their tefillin shel rosh gets between their arm and their tefillin, it's not a problem because it's leather, this is leather, their skin is skin, it's min b'mina, it's of the same type, so it doesn't actually stop, it doesn't block, okay? So think about a sheitel, it's hair, right? So if a sheitel is hair, and there's a beneficial energy of the hair, perhaps the hair of the sheitel allows that energy out more, while hiding it from the eye of the observer. In other words, on the revealed level, which the revealed level is Malchus, that goes according to what the eye sees, the role that the woman plays, the act that she acts in the world, on that level, it's covered. The chitzonim can't get at it. But on the pnimius level of keser, which her hair is like the hair of a nazir, or like the beard of a man, or these kind of things, that has a beneficial aspect to it, on that level, perhaps, this is a big perhaps, a sheitel, which is made of hair, allows it out more than a tichel, or than some other kind of covering. And if that were the case, maybe it would be better to wear a sheitel of real hair than synthetic, but this is really like, let's just say, it's just an idea, because if you think about it, it seems so strange that the Rebbe was so adamant about the sheitel, so adamant about it. I could understand the idea that the Rebbe said a sheitel is permissible. In America, women aren't going to go around with the tichel on their hair, so a sheitel is fine. Like as a heter, it makes perfect sense, right? But that's not what it is. The Rebbe wanted dafka the sheitel and nothing else. And what is the reason the Rebbe gave? The Rebbe said with the tichel, the woman might be tempted to pull it back a little and some of her hair will show. With the sheitel, every single hair of her head will be covered. But that's only beneficial if it has nothing to do with modesty. If it has to do with modesty, what difference does it make if a few hairs are sticking out when she has this beautiful sheitel of a model, right? But if it has to do with keeping the energy held back, then it makes perfect sense that no matter how attractive the sheitel is, it's better than a tichel that might allow some of the roots to show or something like that. And also, if, and just saying if, the sheitel made of hair somehow allows out the beneficial energy in these times that we live in, that the Rebbe stressed so much, that as we come closer to Mashiach, the role of women as being from the level of Keser is more and more coming to the front. And we see that in our times, the Rebbe stressed the role of women much more than it ever was before. The Rebbe gave them much more roles out in the public than ever before. Okay? So perhaps the sheitel is a necessary tool for the woman who is now out in the public so much to have the benefit of this higher energy, this energy of Keser, which is sort of like brings a blessing and a success into the world, light into the world, that if it's covered with something, a fabric or some other kind of material, it can't come out. And she can't access that as much, let's say. So these are all perhaps things. And it's getting late, and I see some people are falling asleep, so I'm not going to read more now. If there's a desire to go into it inside and see the sources, we'll do another one next week. And we'll actually study the Maamer and see how it actually fits into the words of the Tzemach Tzedek. If not, it's also good that the concept, you guys got the general concept. But to sum it up, it comes out that every one of the levels of hair, it has a reason to it. And actually, and this is something very interesting. The Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schneerson, he writes in one of his commentaries on the Zohar, and I don't have the book at home. I saw it years ago in the library in Beitar Elite. He writes there about, he describes how the bedekening happens under the chuppah. Okay? He says that, and he uses words very similar to what I'm going to tell you. He says that this girl, until now, her hair grew long and it was exposed. And the chitzonim were permitted to latch onto it. And it was fine. It wasn't a consequence. But now, before she goes under the chuppah, which the chuppah symbolizes the yichud actually. It's the first stage of the yichud. And the yichud room is the second stage of the yichud. But the original chuppah in the times of the Gemara was actually in the man's house, let's say. Okay? Before she goes into the chuppah, her husband takes a fabric and covers her hair. In other words, according to what the Rebbe's father is writing, the bedekin is more about covering the hair than the face. Okay? He covers her head, covers her hair, making a statement to the world that she is now cut off from the chitzonim, that they can no longer latch on, because she's now entering her role towards the process of becoming a mother. And from that point on, her hair is covered for all time. Now, I know that most people I know in our wedding, we didn't do hair covering from the chuppah, but Rav Ashkenazi, I heard paskin. There are Rabbanim who paskin that the woman has to have her hair covered under the chuppah. Like from the bedekening on, and according to what the Rebbe's father writes there, that would seem to be correct, let's say, because that's the symbolism. So you see from those words actually that it fits very nicely with this idea that every stage, every level, the hair has a different energy, it has a different meaning, and how the Torah deals with it. It just has to do with managing this energy and making sure that it's used in the most beneficial way in the world. Okay?
Thank you.
That's it. Any discussion, comments, arguments?
I was just thinking that, like, when you speak to people who are secular or not Jewish and they want to know about women covering their hair, there's, like, not a simple explanation.
How do you explain this on one foot?
Kabbalistically, all hair has energy, and the energy of a woman's hair should be concealed. But that sounds so convoluted and like...
It's very convoluted.
It's not satisfying at all. Like, these other answers aren't really
That's why people
satisfying
always say it's
either.
special for my husband, because you don't want to get into all these...
To me, this, I mean...
things that people don't relate to. Or
This, at least, okay, because I don't have to cover my hair, I can't relate to it in that aspect. But as far as an answer, from a point of view of just does the answer fit or make sense, this is very satisfying to me. The other answers are not satisfying because they have holes in them. This answer, and look, it's complicated because it's a complicated thing. Because the way our bodies work is complicated, the way they function, and the reason that it's complicated is because every part has a meaning to it and has a role, and those roles come down from higher spiritual levels, and that's why if anything goes wrong with your body, you have to go to an expert, a doctor who studied for however many years to fix some minor thing that goes wrong with your body, because it's complicated. Well, the hair is part of that. It's not a simple thing. But we have no problem with the idea that if, we get a pimple or something, you need a dermatologist to take this test and do this thing and prescribe that thing and whatever to tackle it. But we like to just think that, I think especially for girls, for females, because as girls, their hair is such an integral part of how they look, it's styled, bows, ribbons, and everything. And then at a certain point, it's kind of taken away from them. They get used to not having to think about it because it has no ramification. Then at a certain point, it comes online and it has a ramification. But on the other hand, women are used to this with their bodies. There's certain parts of their bodies that don't function, and then all of a sudden they reach puberty and, they have periods and all kinds of things. So if you think about it, and it's a very complicated thing as well, if something goes wrong, So if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense that up until a certain point, it's not really a big deal, and at a certain point, it comes online, so to speak.